this is a very critical area. I love this part of sales training and part of leadership training about different personality styles. Now, there are about 400 slides that go with this, and I'll cut it down to one. Now, we all have our preferred style, and we have more. We're all of these styles. We're all partly analytical, part amiable, part expressive, and part driver. But we'll tend to move towards one of these more than another, and if we're skilled, we'll move through them depending on the situation. And there are lots of things to look at who is what personality styles. And Myers-Briggs have a very great 16-section analysis of who you are. I'm not that smart. I can't remember 16 data points about someone to work out what personality style they are. I can only manage 2. And this is what I find works very well, is I make 2 decisions when I meet people. On a scale of low to high, is this person low in assertion terms, or are they high in assertion terms? How do I tell that? Power in their voice, strength of opinion, number of ideas they have, how forcefully they project themselves to me. That's assertion. That's one decision, high or low. Boom. Second decision on a vertical scale is this person people-oriented, or are they outcome-oriented? Do they talk about the results, or do they talk about the team? So again, as you're talking to people, you'll get an idea of where they're located. So that simple four-point quadrant between those 2 decisions, very quick and easy to make that. The trick is not knowing it. The trick is being able to switch gears yourself. Unfortunately, the vast majority, and I'd say this is probably, 90%, I'd say maybe 95% of salespeople always operate in their preferred style. So if they're an expressive, and lots of salespeople are because you need to be assertive, but people-oriented, and you're dealing with a CFO or you're dealing with a scientist, this would be great for Andrew, for dealing with chemists, right? If you're dealing with lawyers, they're very analytical people. They're very data, evidence, proof driven. And you're up here, the big picture, strategic, blue ocean, inverted commas type of discussion, and they want to know who says so besides you. Where is the evidence? Show me the numbers. You've got to get out of being expressive and get into being analytical and talk about evidence. The same way with the driver. I'm a driver type, by the way. All right? I know myself, I'm a driver. What do drivers live by? Time is money. Let's go. Boom, boom, boom. Don't waste my time. That's the driver. So when you come into my office, you say, Greg, we should do this. Here's the 3 reasons why I recommend this one. And you get a decision straight away. Yes, no, boom, get out of my office. That's a driver. But if you're an amiable, which is the opposite type, Greg, let's have a cup of tea. Let's get to know each other. Let's think about the team and how they're going to feel about this. Totally opposite approach. So if you're an expressive, for example, and you're with a driver, as a salesperson dealing with a driver, straight to the point, don't waste their time. They're very happy about that. They're very quick decision makers. But if you're dealing with an amiable, it's typical, sort of urban versus rural. You're standing too close to them if they're from the countryside. If you're in an urban environment, you don't mind standing so close. Their voice is quite loud in an urban environment compared to a country environment. The speed of speech is different. So it's the same type of thing we see culturally in our normal society. It's the same thing. A driver doesn't mind fast-paced, quick decision, move on. An amiable, that loud, strong voice. It's a bit too threatening and moving too fast. And they're not thinking about the people part. What about the team? The viewpoint is different. So the point for a salesperson or a sales leader is, as you discover what particular preferred style that person is, you need to switch gears. You stay the same personality. You're not becoming a schizophrenic type of person with 4 different personalities. You have the one personality, but you have 4 speaking styles. And the ability to do that is a critical skill for salespeople and sales leaders and leaders in general. So, in terms of performance management, this is very, very interesting. We talk about the law of restricted performance. What happens here is you've now become from salesperson to sales leader as a promotion, and you're responsible. So then you discover that the salespeople are actually conditioning your expectations. You've got to hit certain targets, and they're telling you, boss, it's a jungle out there. Oh, competition's just incredible. The economy, look at it. And so your expectations are getting taken down. And so you start to see them as basically down here, not up here. So what do you get as a result? Mediocrity. So it's very important as a sales leader that you don't get into that cycle. You've got to keep challenging your salespeople. They'll tell you 1,000 reasons why it's never going to happen. But unless you keep challenging them, you're only going to get a mediocre outcome. It's a very difficult thing to do that, but you've got to keep thinking, I'm sure they can do 20% more. If you only just keep that one sentence in your mind every time you're dealing with salespeople as a sales leader, you'll do much better, because then your expectations are up here. And they will come up to your expectations. But boy, they're going to take their time, and they're going to kick and fight and bitch and carry on all the way up, because that's how salespeople operate. And by the way, they're fantastic at it because they're so persuasive. That's why you employed them. These people are persuasive. They're believable. They're good at this stuff, right? Be careful about them being too good at this stuff. Okay. So when we have mistakes, and this is interesting, we ask people to be innovative. We ask people to step up. We ask people to take responsibility, particularly step up and do new things. But by definition, we will fail in things that are new, or we will have less success in things that are unfamiliar for us. We have to have some margin for these people to fail. If you ask people to take ownership, sponsor a project, run the project, and they make a mistake, something goes wrong, and you just come down on them so hard and criticize them, complain about what's happened, and this is unbelievable, what are you thinking? Guess what? You've just cancelled their innovation ticket for the rest of their life. They'll never put up a suggestion ever again, because the penalty of failure is too high relative to the rewards of success. You just kill their innovation right there. So how we handle mistakes is very, very critical. And you see it here. We start with research. What actually happened? Not what you were told happened, or what people who report to you imagine happened. Actually, what happened? And then in the conversation, we start with rapport. Because if there's been a problem, do they need to know there's a problem? It's very rare that someone, when there's been a mistake, doesn't know there's a mistake. Hey, guess what? This is not new information from them. They know there's been a mistake, so they already feel bad. And they're expecting to get hammered by the boss, because that's how we've all learned. That's how we were educated, unfortunately. Don't be that type of educator. Why not start with building some rapport? Tell them how valuable they are to the organisation. They make one mistake or a big mistake, they're still valuable to the organisation. I remember a story, I think it was Lee Iacocca, I might have the names wrong now, but one of his executives lost a couple of $1 million through a particular project. And the guy goes to his office expecting to be fired. And he says, fire you? We just spent a couple of $1 million educating you. Different way of looking at it, you see. So start with, they're valuable to the organisation. You appreciate that they stepped up. You appreciate that they do good work. Not everything is 100% failure. There's 99% is probably working. Recognise those parts, build the rapport, make them feel comfortable. Second point there is you reference what's happened. Then at that point you get the reaction. Are they in denial? Or are they, yes, sorry, I made a mistake. So depending which way we go, if they can relate, then you restore your trust in them, you reassure them, and maybe they might need training, or you're trying to keep that person, okay? We just educated you, spent a lot of money educating you with this mistake. You've learned from that. You're going to be a better manager, a better operator as a result. If they're in denial, then you're going to go a different way, which you're going to restate very clearly for them what's happened and the ramifications. There's probably going to be a reprimand in there around their performance and potentially affect their remuneration, their bonus, etc. And then if they still don't get it, then maybe there's no longer a place in the organisation for them, because their motivation or their commitment is such that it's not sufficient for the organisation. Now, this next slide is a bit busy in the sense of it's a build, but it refers to each of these problems, and it relates one of the principles that you'll see in the Golden Book that you've got there. So the first one there is rapport, and it says begin with praise and honest appreciation. Now, often conversations don't begin with praise, especially when there's been a mistake. It's usually straight into what happened in the mistake. Begin with praise and honest appreciation. Build that rapport. That's how you build it. You tell them what's good and what they need to do better, or recognise things already doing well. Then the next stage, as you see, we get in here to the reference and relate. So we're trying to look at calling attention to mistakes indirectly. They know there was a mistake. Hey, you made a mistake. This is not helpful information. Okay? So you don't put it right in their face. You try and talk about it indirectly. Second one there is, are you perfect? Did you never make a mistake in your career? Isn't that not how you got knowledge? Is that not how we've all learnt everything we know that works, by doing it the wrong way? So you talk about yourself. So you show them that, hey, you know what? I understand. Yeah, I've done that too. I remember when in my career, at your stage, I made mistakes too. It's not a life-threatening problem necessarily. And then ask questions instead of giving orders, because once you give the order, you own it. Once you ask a question and they answer it, they own it. And what you want is ownership on their part, not on your part. So we move on to the next stage. We relate to the next principles. So here we're talking about resistance, or we've got to restate it, or we've got to restore. So let the other person save face is a very oriental idea, which I'm just amazed that Dale Carnegie in early part of the 1900s could actually take that into New York, where he's based, and get New Yorkers to go for that. I don't imagine that New Yorkers ever cared about anyone's face ever, but he was thinking about how do you build a relationship. So there's been a mistake, but you've still got a relationship. Where's that trust? Where's that communication? How do you get them buying the vision? How do you get them working well again? So let them save it. And after that, praise the slightest improvement. Don't save it up for a rainy day, that when there's a really big thing happening, I'm going to tell you it's great. Small things get picked up, and that's motivating. Oh, it's not a big thing, but it's a small thing, but you're recognised. Do you feel good about that? And then finally, give the other person a fine reputation to live up to. If I think you're rubbish and you're not very good, I'm going to talk to you and approach you in a certain way. If I think you've got great potential and there's been a blip, a mistake, and I think you can grow much further, I'll approach you in an entirely different way. And in fact, my approach will determine how you're going to turn out. Because if I think you're no good, you're going to be no good. If I think you're great, you're probably going to be great. So we have got so much power as the leader in determining the outcome of that person. This principle, give them a fine reputation to live up to, is a good one. See them as positive. See them as potentials who've got greater growth opportunity. And then we get into reassure and retain here. So use encouragement, make the faults seem easy to correct. Okay, break it down, what went wrong, yes, how can we fix that? And then finally, make the other person happy about your suggestion in this part. If you tell someone something, you own it. If you ask a question and they answer it, they own it. And through this process, they go into a stage of self-discovery. So rather than you giving them the answer, they find the answer themselves. They believe it a lot more, it's more credible for them, and they remember it forever. So self-discovery as an educational process is vastly superior to just telling people information through lecture or through advice. So rather than being an expert in advice giving, try and be an expert in bringing out questions to get self-discovery. And then here we have the reprimand and replace, and it says here, as you'll see in the 30 principles, use all of them, because this is people skills, and this is where, if they are going to leave the company, you want it in a way that is not acrimonious, destroys the motivation of other people, creates any sabotage problems, or influences that person's ability to move on and want to move on and be confident to move on and do something else, because obviously this hasn't worked out. So Dale Carnegie's principles are very helpful. And talk now about how we actually transfer skills through coaching. Because as a sales leader, you need to coach people. You need to get people to move from one skill set to another. But there's virtually no training for that. If you're an educator, you're trained in how to do that. But if you're a salesperson, you become promoted to sales leader, where was that bit in your education? It doesn't exist. Now, this is a whole workshop in itself. It's probably a couple of workshops in itself, so I can't cover everything. But I just want to cover a couple of key points here. The first one there is hear and listen. Salespeople hear, but do they listen? And this is where you've got to check. Are they just hearing but not actually listening? If you want to educate people, check they're actually listening. Get some feedback on what you've just said, because they're nodding. You know, the lights are on, but no one's at home type of problem. Their eyes are open, but they're actually not listening to you. If they listen, then they have a better chance of understanding. And check for understanding. Is there actually understanding there? And then relate that to their ability. You know, they're already doing things well. They could always do things better. So be a person who looks for what's going well and praise that, recognise that, and recognise that they could do things better. Don't be a fault finder, someone who criticises. Look for the good and tell them how they could do it even better. And then we're looking for their motivation to learn, to self-discover, self-address the problems, and to get that commitment to educate themselves. Now, in a skill transfer process, there are lots and lots and lots of detail on this, but those are the fundamental steps we have to go through. And you've got to be hitting motivation. You've got to be getting that commitment to get them to take up those skills. Because often people feel very comfortable in their comfort zone around the things they know now. They don't think they need to do anything new or different. I'm good where I am. But you've got to get the motivation to want to do better. You've got to get that commitment to have the behaviour change. And if there's one thing, if you ask me, well, what does Dale Carnegie training do that's specific to Dale Carnegie? I would say it's getting behaviour change. And that is extremely difficult. We are trainers, 250 hours minimum training to become a certified Dale Carnegie trainer, to get behaviour change. And for us, we know how hard it is. So if you're just a salesperson who's become a sales leader and you haven't any of that type of detailed training, how do you get behaviour change in people? Not very easy. So these steps become very important. Now we look at the cycle of accelerated learning here. And on the top right-hand side, attitude. Yes, they may need to, they may want to, but they don't do it. There's no behaviour change. There's a motivation gap there. They're not motivated enough to make the changes in what they normally do to get a behaviour outcome that's different. So that's one problem we've got to work on. So you've got to get them to, I will do it and show me how. So you've got to work on that attitude. Just telling them it doesn't work. You've got to get them to actually want to do it. That means take it from, yes, I will, to I do. Okay, and then we come into knowledge where we've got principles, fundamentals, concepts. Same problem. I give you information. It's a classic of the old cliche about giving people fish and teaching people how to fish. When you give information, you're giving people fish all the time. So you give them some fish today, well, you've got to come back tomorrow and give them some more fish, more information. It just goes on and on and on. The problem is you give them the information, but they don't use it. They're still in their comfort zone. They don't own it. So you've got to come back and give them some more later for the next round of fish. Instead, what you want is self-discovery. You want people to own the information and to want to use it, to actually take the behaviour change to use it. So that gets out of I know into I do it. That is a critical part. And the way to do that is here, rote practice with coaching. So correct modelling of the behaviour, and then the coaching to get that I know becomes I do. And this is where, for a lot of training, it breaks down because we stop at the sort of intellectual level of I know, and it never gets into the physical of I do. And then finally, once we get that, it becomes a habit, becomes a default habit. So you have follow-up coaching, you try and make that the new behaviour pattern so that you get this cycle of learning in adaptive skill transfer. But you've got to have all of those pieces happening to get an outcome. So sales meetings are sort of interesting. Most meetings probably don't need to be held anyway. Well, certainly probably don't need to be held for as long as they're held. That's the first problem. And sales meetings tend to be very one-dimensional. What are the numbers? What's the pipeline? Because time is short. Why is time short? Because the sales leader is still trying to do too much themselves. They're not thinking how to get it with production through the team members, through leverage. So the sales meetings become very truncated. So instead of opening, say for example, you start with a report on the goal achievement, where we are today, and that's just one part of it, that tends to become all of it. Then what about this next part here, about inspiration and motivation? Because as I said, sales is a tremendous roller coaster of emotions, and people need to be motivated in sales. It's a very critical part of dealing with this very nature of the business. Are we doing that? Are we inspiring and motivating people in the sales meeting, or are we just hearing numbers and then looking at people, where's the rest of the numbers? And then, of course, information updates, what's happening with products, what's happening with clients. Very important to share that, particularly who's doing what with who, so you're all coordinated within the company. Yes, use it for training of coaching, knowledge, skills, some practice. If you're presenting a product, present it to each other. Practice, get some role play going, get some coaching of the role play, 3 and 3s. All these things can be done. It doesn't take very long. If you're doing cold calling, or if you're doing phone work, sit back to back so you can't see each other and imagine you're speaking on the phone. Have some person monitoring it and then rotate. These things don't take very long. By the way, they're free. It doesn't cost you money. And then finally, we set some goals. Now, you have goals for the year, but maybe this is where we are in the business this week or this cycle. Where do we want to be next week? What's going to happen on certain things? Let's get some information on this. Let's gather some information on that and come back next week and use it. So the full sales meeting hardly gets used. The potential of having a really full sales meeting is there, but you're probably getting 10% of the potential, I would say, for most sales meetings that I see anyway. Now, time management, again, this is a whole workshop in itself. I'm not going to go into too much detail on time management, and Carlo's checking his watch there, so obviously we might have a time problem, I don't know. What time have we got, Carlo? 5 to 9, well, we're almost done. Problem here is the inbox looks like this, and if we took things off the top of a pile of papers and did it in that priority order, no one would be happy. But that's what email is doing to us. It's giving us this type of undifferentiated ability to use our time, and as Drucker says there, time is all you've got. How you manage that, that makes all the difference. So, what are some principles we need to look at here? Basically, this is a key one. We know the Pareto principle, 20% of the salespeople produce 80% of the results. Great. The trouble is, where do we spend our time? Are we spending our time on the 20% of things that get the results? Are we spending 80% of our time on the 20% of things that get the results? The answer usually is no. We're usually spending 80% of our time on the 80% of things that get 20% of the results. So go back and look at your time and you say, well, how do we do that? Things like, you see time logs, you want to find out where you're spending your time, check it. And on this list, prioritizing and delegating are huge time savers, but we don't tap into them. A lot of people don't operate off priorities. Whatever happens in the day happens in the day. They don't direct the day, or they don't delegate. That's the other one. So for prospecting, the top 2 there are where all the money is, and they're free. You've already got existing clients. How can you get more share of wallet from that client? And you're doing a good job. How do you get referrals to get more clients? And the other one there is cold calling. There are techniques for that. Everything else costs money, but there's so much left undone in these 2 areas of account penetration and referrals that we wonder why we have to spend all this other money. And of course, you know, we think that business social media is an answer. It's not an answer, it's just a tool. Again, if we're not really working those other 2, it doesn't matter how well we do this, you might be waiting for the leads. And it is a numbers game. How many people you see, or how many people you call, how many you speak to, how many you get to see, how many proposals you get to put out, how many contracts you get done, average size of contract, it's all numbers. It's all numbers. So once you know those ratios, you track those ratios, you can tell where the gaps are, and you can tell basically how the pipeline will go. If I ask salespeople, do you know your own ratios? If I ask the leaders, do you know your people's ratios? Often the answer is no, they don't know. And again, what I sell, what I buy, different. Does the salesperson have a clear picture of what's motivating the buyer? Often not. They're concentrating on what they're doing. How do you find that out? Ask your client. You know, why are they satisfied? How do they apply it? What were the results? What was the return for them? Go back and look at those things and you'll find how to speak to clients about what's in it for them. So meet the client. After the client's had that meeting, you might have come up with some problems that haven't been resolved, fix those. Get some referrals. Try and get some more business. It's not a difficult thing to do. So, account development. How does your client see you in these aspects? How is your brand regarded by the client? Product, your service, the salesperson's value. How do they regard that? If you don't know how they see you in those areas, how are you going to have a rich relationship of trust with the client? Do we know those things? And in the organizational chart, where is our champion? Where is the person in the company who wants to have our relationship as part of that company's progress? Do we know where they are? And who's the decision maker? Are we talking to the right person? Often we're not. Do we know who the decision maker is? Often we don't. Often the salesperson has got no idea. And what's driving the decision maker? Depending on where you sit, depends on how you see it. The CFO sees it differently to the CEO. The Chief Operating Officer sees it differently to everybody else. The Chief Scientific Officer sees it differently to everyone else. Understand where you sit drives what you see. And then the top is the primary interest is what is it that we want, and the bottom one, the dominant buying influence, is the why we want it. Do we know the difference? Do we know what they want? Do we know why they want it? Okay, and this is, time management, pipeline management. The bottom line here on projection is the bottom here of total projected, and start there. You start at the bottom. This is where we want to get to. And then you go up and you fill out those other details to work out how you're going to get there. Don't start from the top and get a number. Start with a number and work backwards as to where you need to be, how many new prospects you need, how much share of wallet you need for account penetration. Very simple thing. And then this is a great exercise. Put your solutions down one side of a chart and put your clients across the other, and then start matching solutions for clients. Every time you do this, you'll be amazed at how many more solutions you have for clients than you are currently serving them with. Try it. It is a very simple exercise. Very revealing, very revealing. And then what's your top account criteria? What are you looking for? Who is the ideal client? Do you know that? Do your salespeople know that? And where are we in the pipeline? Are we going to have plenty today and then next month there's going to be, sales are down, and then, 2 months later they're up again? Is it up and down? Or is it consistently coming through? Do you know where it is today? And lastly, innovation. We need to do more, faster, better with less. That means ideas. And basically, on this chart here, you've got two ways of going. You've got continuous improvement and leapfrogging ideas. Continuous improvement is very steady, but don't just use that. Also look for leaps where we can jump, take an absolute leap forward. Because one is looking in the rearview mirror of the past, and the other is trying to look to the future. So between the two of these, you're going to get the outcome you want. And then in terms of brainstorming, very, very simple idea. Green light, red light thinking. Green light, what is possible? Red light, is it possible? Just don't mix them up. Okay, do one, do the green light first, do the red light second. Very, very simple thing. Often though, in innovation, people start criticizing ideas in the idea generation stage, which just kills the innovation right there. So green light, red light, keep them apart. And finally, there's a 9-step process to innovation. And you start with the visualization, where do we want to be? Then we have fact-finding, where are we? Problem-finding, what is the problem? We need to identify it, and which problem are we going to work on first? Prioritization. Ideas, to prove we can do that, that's green light thinking, get a lot of ideas out. Then the next one is solution finding. Which of those ideas is the most viable? That's making a judgment. That's the first part. The last section here, where, we get approval and support and funding to drive the idea. We have implementation, so we start trying it. Is this working or not? Follow-up, how is it going? And then finally, evaluation. Did it work or not work? So those are the 12 igniters for sales leadership that I've covered today. As I say, this is a big topic which I've tried to hone down, probably not honed it down as well as I probably needed to. But thank you very much. I'd like to leave you with a thought. The leader in sales has got tremendous power to influence the organisation. Make sure that power is being used to its maximum effect. Because if you do, you will be much more successful than your competitors, because trust me, they are all really struggling. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining the Leadership Japan podcast. If you would like to have access to more great insights and information, then go to japan.dalecarnegie.com.